I'm Elliot Fern. I'm the Managing Director, founder of DataStream. We're based up at C4DI Northallerton, Office 12, little 6x4 cell, bars on the windows, the lot. We love it up there. So if you're ever around, yeah, no nets or anything, it's all gone. Purpose of today is sort of talk about not really artificial intelligence, trying to park that and forget about it, which we'll explain in a minute, but talking more about data strategy, infrastructure, governance, talent, and the rest. So if we're all good, we'll get started. So I'll jump straight in. I want to talk about where we are currently with AI in terms of everyone talking about it. I don't think you can go to an event at the minute without thinking, what's the AI angle for this at the moment? I've seen literature papers for AI shoot through the roof in the last 2 to 3 years. I think we all probably know the reason, which is ChatGPT. I think that was really the pinnacle of people's interest. I think it was 21, 22 when it came out, and people were fascinated by what it could do in terms of receiving a prompt and getting an output from it. I think DALL-E was quite popular as well, and we've seen Mid-Journey and things. But I think what people are really struggling to realize is what the value is that AI is offering. I think it's great that it can write a poem in in Jar Jar Binks language and whatever else, but I don't think it offers businesses the value they were expecting. I think that's what's really led us to this point where, if we look at the Gartner hype cycle, we're past this point where we had the innovation trigger. We had ChatGPT, which is where our inflated expectations were, and we thought it would solve everyone's problems and we'd never have to work again because ChatGPT would write our emails and our marketing strategy and our sales and everything else. But I think within the last 6 months, we're starting to see a trough, and I think we're about at this red line. Not officially, no data to back this up, but I feel like we're approaching this trough of disillusionment. And the reason I think that is because if you look at the history of AI, it's always been peaks and troughs. Ever since the 1950s, we've always had it going up and down, and I think we're on our way down, is my personal opinion. I've got a few little indicators that sort of show the same thing, which I'll go through in a minute. But what I want to bring your attention to is, are we approaching an AI winter? So we've had 3 AI summers, we've had 2 AI winters since the 1950s. So an AI summer and winter, it's not really got a specific definition, which is quite classic for artificial intelligence. But an AI summer is usually where we have this huge hype. Everyone's talking about it. We've got loads of investment. We've got loads of resource being plundered into it. But an AI winter is the opposite. Resources cut, funding's cut. And I think what we've started to see, especially within the last week, with news headlines like this, we're starting to approach a real slowdown. So this was the 2nd of August, a week ago, government cutting 1.3 billion of UK tech and AI funding. A large part of that was the AI supercomputer up in Edinburgh, which fortunately for Edinburgh University, they already spent 30 million of the funding that was cut. But we're seeing the new Labour government sort of rolling this back and sort of saying that, hold your horses a bit. This wasn't originally allocated in the budget. What we're also seeing is a lot of snake oil salesmen, a lot of people slapping AI on their product name just to keep up with the hype. But a recent report shows that 40% of AI startups don't actually use AI at all. And I think that's really contributing to this sort of AI winter that's coming, or potentially coming, is people thinking that it's going to solve all their problems, and it doesn't. Thinking that AI is the solution when there's not actually even any AI in it. So I think people are going to be disillusioned with that. We also see it coupled with regulation, EU and UK. So AI EU Act is now in play. We're now seeing that come into force, where companies have to make sure they're above board if they're using AI. And we're also sort of seeing the UK AI bill as well, that's currently sitting on the House of Lords. And I think the issue with that is it's going to make it harder and harder for businesses to navigate the regulatory landscape. Funding's being cut, regulations growing and growing, and I think the rules on it are going to get more complicated. And when businesses haven't got a solid data and AI strategy in place, I think they're just going to choose not to pick it at all, which is going to contribute to a further AI winter. We also see this as well, a further disillusionment. I saw this week that a CIO of a big pharma company over in America cancelled all their Copilot licenses after 1 quarter. They had Microsoft licenses that covered everything. They went for the additional Copilot licenses and scrapped them all. We've also seen that Gartner predicts that 30% of generative AI projects will be abandoned after proof of concept phase. So we're starting to see businesses wake up to the fact that AI isn't all it was cracked up to be. And after this sort of peak of interest, we're now seeing that trough of disillusionment come into play. We've also got things like the UK deciding to curb overseas hiring. So we have a huge shortage of data and AI experts in this country. I think it's going to be exacerbated by us deciding not to hire any more talent from overseas. Originally, that was not the part of the plan. And we're putting more and more resources into hiring from India and Europe and America for researchers to come over here and start developing AI projects. I think curbing that's only going to contribute more to the AI winter. And finally, AI privacy concerns. More and more individuals are getting concerned about how their data is being used. You need to get more and more consent from every single individual, and you've got to be able to show if they have been affected by AI and things like that. I think that's going to really slow things down for the industry. So all of that, I think, is possibly going to contribute at least to a slowdown in AI uptake. I think a potential AI winter. What we've also seen, a couple of funny examples that you might have seen in the news, is a bit of AI regret, which you've got nugget overload from McDonald's and you've got the Zestimate disaster. These were two very, very big cases of AI going wrong. It was a nice to have, it was part of the hype. They got swept up in that we've got to have AI somewhere in our business, and it fell over and they made huge mistakes. For McDonald's, people were getting orders for bacon milkshakes that weren't on the menu. They were getting orders for hundreds and hundreds of nuggets that people hadn't ordered, all because they hadn't taken into account background noise when they were trying to speak through the speakerphone. They've since scrapped it. It was mainly America. I don't think it was here. I never saw it here. I think it was mainly in the States. Even worse was Zillow. I don't know whether anyone's ever used Zillow or heard of it. It's a bit like Zoopla for property. So Zillow, you can go on, you can put your address and you can find out the value estimate of your home, and it also shows you what it's projected to be over the next 3 to 5 years using machine learning and artificial intelligence. What happened was they gave these estimate scores, which was a Zillow estimate of what your house is likely to be, and they were using that to buy up homes themselves. So it's almost like a WeBuyAnyHouse.com, and they would say, we think your house is going to be worth this in the future, we'll buy it now at this price and we'll sell it in 5 years. That fell over. It was just wrong. It didn't take everything into account. Market conditions fluctuate, and they lost a lot of money, and they actually fired 25% of their workforce because of it, and they scrapped it. Again, a lot of AI regret contributing to that slowdown in uptake from people in the market. So I want to talk more about rushing into AI, and I think the best way to do that is to talk about my own experience, which is my first AI project, which sounds quite nice, but it was a couple of years ago, and it was actually here in Hull, and there were two companies. They were sister companies actually, so they were both very related. They're actually in the same building and still are to this day. I think they've got a slightly different agreement now since I've left, but this was my first AI project, which was Company A, the traditional IT company. They sold VoIP, they sold traditional IT support, Microsoft licenses, and things like that. The print and tech company sold specifically printers and automation technology. And what they were trying to do, because they were sister companies and this company owned about half of this company, is they wanted to start looking at merging the sales functions. So what they thought was, instead of having two separate sales functions where they would only sell half of their IT offering, we would only sell half of the IT offering, if we pulled it together, we could increase market share. So my project was to try and use AI to find incoming sales calls and identify them and assign them either company A or company B. So would a sales representative from company A be better suited for this customer than someone from company B, and vice versa? So who should it go to, essentially, so that you could pull your sales resource, and then when the lead comes in, they're targeted and they've got a better service and they're more likely to buy, and things like that. This was a great idea. Spoiler alert, it didn't go very well. This was actually my dissertation project for university. So when I was studying my master's in artificial intelligence, I rushed in and I thought, no, this sounds perfect. A real world example of artificial intelligence in the wild. Let's do it. So this was my entire research project was dedicated to this. And what we saw was it just didn't quite work. The issue was we didn't have the data we needed. So we needed all the sales data, and you would think that companies would have clean, available, accessible sales data just to give you and be like, here you go, run away, but that wasn't really the case. So, as well as a few other factors. So what we saw was ultimately we had poor strategy. Yes, the idea and the strategic decision to use AI to try and merge those sales functions was a good idea, but it needed to be bigger. It needed a bigger picture. It needed better strategy on how it was actually going to work in practice. And they had no data talent there. So data was just spreadsheets, CRMs, ad hoc here and there, emails, PDFs. They had physical paper sales contracts that I would have to comb through and type out the data into a format I needed. So I had no data talent available. They had no data governance. So something we struggled with was getting access to it. So I had multiple meetings with CFOs saying, I'm not going to run off with your data. It is safe, it is secure, it's going to stay on your network. And we had to do all this kind of sort of compliance checks, data security checks. You know, we had to write up processes on how it was never going to leave the network and things like that. We also had a poor data culture. So I'll always remember speaking to sales directors. So something I always do with any data project is always do a factory walk. That doesn't always work in practice, but sort of walk the walk, understand the mindset of the people that you're trying to do the project for. So I went and spoke to sales directors and I said, this is what managing directors have told me to do. This is what we want to achieve, and this is how we want to achieve it. From day one, they were not sold. They were not interested. They said it wouldn't work. They were pretty much actively rooting against me. They were pretty open about that. They did not want it to work. They wanted sales to be controlled almost exclusively by them, and nothing could go on. There's no AI dictating who's going to get sales leads. That's going to be completely sales director driven. So that's what we call a poor data culture, where you know, from the top down, no one was convinced that data had any value. We also had, like I said, broken siloed infrastructure where data, a lot of the time, 70 to 80% of any data project is dedicated to gathering that data, and that was often an issue. And the quality of the data was poor itself. A lot of the fact it was duplicates, and it just wasn't accurate, resulting ultimately in project failure. And it's almost a self-perpetuating thing. You know, you start off with a project, everyone thinks it's going to fail, and then they kind of make it fail themselves through not being cooperative and being, you know, almost actively destructive, and it led to a project failure. And I didn't fail my dissertation, don't worry. I just pretty much wrote the entire thing on the above, which was, this is what we tried to achieve. The AI did do it. It did assign, you know, incoming lead, oh, it's a school in Hull, they've got this money to spend, this is what they want to do, that's pretty much associated with company B. Or it's an accountants in Lincolnshire, and this is what they've got to spend, and they've got no infrastructure at the minute, all right, company A. So it was very good at doing that, but it was almost guessing. You know, it had no real sort of knowledge base to go off that had any value. So yes, it worked, but the biggest part of the dissertation was talking about this, which is that AI is great in theory, but in practice it's not as easy as you might think. And I think it all comes down to this. I think a lot of people think AI is just like a piece to the puzzle that you can just plug in and it's going to solve all your issues. What you should really be doing is looking at the entire puzzle. And when I mean the entire puzzle, I mean the entire organization. It's not just a tool you can go and buy and say, right, we've now bought this like a CRM, we'll plug it in and that's the thing. It's very much like a CRM. If you go out and buy HubSpot tomorrow, that's not going to give you a sales strategy. It's not going to boost your sales. It's not going to improve your relationship with customers. It's just going to be another thing you've plugged in. And I think AI is the same. I think no one's talking about the rest of it. They're just talking about the power of how it can predict the future, which is great. But if you've got nothing to give it to predict the future, its predictions are just rubbish. And I always come back to this analogy, which I always say, it might be a bit cringy for some, but AI is a bit like the North Star in terms of it's a good guidance point to work towards, but the best value and the most value is actually the journey towards it, which is getting your order and, you know, getting your house in order, getting your data structured and best practice, so that ultimately at one point you can take benefit of AI. And I quite like this picture as well, because instead of just having one star, I like how it's lots of stars because this kind of represents all the noise, which is there's lots of different things you could be doing, there's lots of things you could buy, but you really just need to stay laser focused on what you want to achieve, which differs from business to business. So I think the one thing that my piece of advice, which I'll talk about later, is you need to become data fluent as an organisation. Becoming data fluent is the most valuable thing I think you can possibly do as an organisation right now. It's not finding the best algorithm to predict your sales for the next 12 months because it's not going to work out how you think it's going to work out. The best thing you can do is making sure that your sales data and all your other data is how it's well governed, it's well structured, it's available, it's safe online. The people interacting with that data are talented and there's a culture behind it that allows for success. And I think that's the biggest win for me with AI, is it's a nice guiding point to work towards, but actually the value is the journey to get there. So I want to talk about, for the next half an hour, about how to become data fluent as an organisation. If that's the most valuable thing that you could be doing now as a business, how do you achieve it? So the first thing I want to talk about is data strategy. I think very few people are talking about what a data strategy actually is and where we are now. And that leads me to this next slide, which is random. It's I'll go and, oh, this seems good, ChatGPT, let's go buy a few licenses. Oh, Copilot's good for Excel, let's go buy a couple of those licenses. It's nothing concrete, it's not aligned with your overall business strategy, and what you should be doing is slightly different, which is you should be talking about it in your board meetings. You should be talking about it with your heads of departments and all your different stakeholders on what is it we actually want to achieve as a business. Not forget data for a minute. What is it we want to achieve? Is it we want to improve profitability? Is it we want to do better customer segmentation? Is it we want to reduce unit cost? Whatever it is, think of it as a business point of view and then work backwards from there in terms of, well, how would I know if we're going to achieve that? What data do I need to prove that unit cost is decreasing, that we're improving relationships with our customers? How would we know that? So what data do we need? So my advice is to go away and do that. So if there's what you need to do right now, is go away, and if you can't think of it right now, what are your biggest objectives? What is it we're trying to achieve? And there could be dozens. Write as many as you like, and then from there go, well, what's going to change the business overnight? What's a quick win? What's going to take a lot longer? What would be revolutionary for our business? And then think, well, what do we need to do to achieve that? It's pretty much business strategy. It's no different. And then the data bit comes in when it says, well, what tools do we need in place? What do we need to capture? How will we measure it? What KPIs are we going to track? And how are we going to have our whole organisation focused on delivering this data strategy? So one of the key parts of that is your data infrastructure. Now, a lot of people's data infrastructure looks like that. Way more than you possibly think. And if this resonates with you, you're not in the minority. Everyone's data infrastructure pretty much relies on this. And the issue with that is you've picked this because everyone's pretty much skilled in Microsoft Excel. If you didn't know that was Microsoft Excel, it's Microsoft Excel. And everyone's using this not because through choice, not because you've gone, this is my data strategy, I want to achieve X, and the best tool to achieve X is Microsoft Excel. I guarantee you no one's done that. It's we've picked Microsoft Excel because I know how to use it. So now you're using Microsoft Excel for storage, using it for analysis, using it for data visualization, using it for everything that you could be using other tools for to help deliver that data strategy. You're always turning to Excel. So normally the whole organisation runs off Excel. And I was recently at a food manufacturer, £30 million a year they turn over. And I was shocked when I saw one of these for all their orders, all their recipes, all their sales, every single conceivable data point was trapped in numerous Excels. And I had them walk me through their workflow of how they were doing forecasting and orders for making various meat products and things. And it was copy the data from one spreadsheet, move it to another spreadsheet. That would then put it into a pivot table, copy the results from a pivot table, come bring it back over to the spreadsheet, and ultimately along the line that was their entire data workflow through various spreadsheets, which is fine. But then if you want to start actually measuring anything, it's almost impossible because you have to include various spreadsheets along the way. Is it related to data cleaning?
What you're
It can be.
now.
Yeah, so I mean, data cleaning is part of the data pipeline.
I was talking about it to a corporation this morning, and they were saying one of the main issues was around data cleaning.
Yeah.
And sort of like the workflow around that and how to the integration of AI
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I had another question from an accountant that was like, can AI do data cleaning? And I said, no, AI can't. Well, it could, but there's better ways of doing it. You're thinking of it the wrong way. You're trying to find a use case for AI instead of thinking, my data, again, back to strategy, my data's unclean, I don't trust it. I need better data. That's my strategic thing, get better data. Then you need to go, well, what's the best way of cleaning it? The best way of cleaning it is to run it through workflows that take out, punctuation marks that shouldn't be there, making it formatted to all be the same thing so it's all aligned. AI is not the best tool for that. Python scripting or SQL is probably better for that. Not that you need to know that, but if you do data cleaning in here, that's great, but are you going to save a copy of that data every time you put it through? So if you format column E, are you going to save that so it's got what we call data lineage, which means every time you make a change to the data, you should be keeping a record of it so that you can roll the clock back. If you don't, then you've kind of lost that data and you don't know where it came from, which means when mistakes are made, you can't roll it, but you don't really know what the original data was, or you've got the original data that came in and then you've got the end product, but you cannot for the life of you remember what 10 different people did in that spreadsheet. So by doing it in a different way, you can do it what we call best practice, which is by saying, right, we'll keep the spreadsheets because people know how to use them. I'm not saying move away from spreadsheets. I'm just saying go back to your strategy and think, is Excel the best way of analysing data en masse? No. If you get to 100 million records in here, it won't even open. But if you had a database that could do it, you could do it, no problem. It wouldn't be an issue. We have another customer, well, not a potential customer in Hull, and they've been gathering data, and I think they said they get 10 million rows a minute or 2 minutes. A huge customer. They get a lot of data. That wouldn't fit in here. Again, and you might be thinking we're a lot smaller than that, and it might fit in here. But again, it's not going to really align with your strategic growth objectives, for example. So you're thinking, well, now we'll just stick in here. Another thing I see is that people try and cram stuff into columns because they don't want infinite number of columns because they don't like it in a spreadsheet. But then that means if a feature actually has an impact on the thing you're trying to measure, you're now not capturing it because the tool that you know how to use isn't suitable for your overall objective. So that's why, again, going back to your strategy, what are we trying to achieve? What are the best tool sets to do it? I'm not saying get rid of Excel. If Excel works for you, keep it. Just build an infrastructure around it that allows you to do best practice, which means if you've got an Excel, which I've seen previously, of work loads per day. So if you think of all the jobs a painter or a printing company have done in a day, they might have 100 rows. But every day, for every month, for every year, for the last 30 years, isn't going to fit in here. So what have they got? Their database is a workbook for every day of every week, of every month, of every year for the last 30 years. Isn't great when you want to go and analyse how that demand has fluctuated over time. So again, going back to your strategy, look at your infrastructure and go from there. What I really want you to realise is be aware of him. This isn't actually an individual I know, but it's buy the latest software and all your problems will disappear. I see this a lot with ERPs and CRMs mainly, which is if you just plunder all your resources into HubSpot, that will cure your issues. It'll help, but if you haven't got a strategy on what you're trying to achieve using HubSpot, then it's just as useful as Pipedrive or Zendesk or any of the others. I see this with ERPs as well. The food manufacturer decided that they're going to do an ERP migration. That's not going to help. It's going to be nice that they've got all their data formatted, but their data culture is awful. The talent of the staff and data is terrible. They don't know how to use it. They can't think from a data mindset, and they've got no strategy. It's just, this is an ERP that ranks highly on Gartner's rank of these are the best ERPs. We'll pick number 2 because it's cheaper than number 1. Great, but that isn't a strategy. That's just you picking what the herd is doing. So again, going back to your strategy, does it align? No, so don't fall for it. Don't fall. It might be very convincing. You might say, no, it will solve that, and it's all going to be captured really well. But if you haven't got a strategy, and it's not achieving an objective you want to achieve, and it's just as useless as any other tool, really. So what I challenge you to do is create a blueprint. So once you've got that strategy in place, go away and draw out, sketch out with your heads of department a blueprint of where all your data assets are. What systems have you got in place? What spreadsheets have you got in place? How does that data flow around? What analysis are you doing? Where are you storing it? Who's interacting with it, and how? That's what you should be looking at. So then you can find bottlenecks and silos, and then sort of add that to your strategy, which is eradicate this silo, eradicate that bottleneck, so that data is accessible to the masses within the organisation. So data quality is the third pillar. So if you've missed it, we had data strategy, we had data infrastructure, and now I've called it data quality. It's more data quality and analysis. It's what you actually do with it. So you've said, I want to measure sales output, I want to measure gross profit, I want to measure gross profit per head, which I've seen all KPIs in the past. So you've got to make sure that the data is actually quality. I've had a customer and they've said, oh, that column there, we need to use that for all our calculations. And I'll say, it's only 30% complete. And they go, preposterous. No, our staff always fill in that column. And I show them the data, they don't. All right, because if they don't have to, they genuinely won't. So you've got to make sure, if you're using that data to measure things and to align with your data strategy, say you want to increase sales by 10%, if your data isn't accurate or valid, then you might as well not have the strategy in the first place, because you can't measure it. So you've got to make sure that data is as accurate as possible. I really like this meme, and you might see a few memes from now on. But it says, if you can't see it, it says, as you can see, our top markets are the United States, Canada, USA, and the US. I love this meme because I've seen it countless times. I've seen it at my previous employer, in the managing director's office on a nice big TV, sales by sales staff, and there's only one Steve in the company, but there's 6 on the dashboard. Steve, Stephen, Stephen J, Stephen Jones, Stephen with a PH, with a V, just Steve, all of it. And it's all like that. How can you measure it if you've not got that quality in place? So you've really got to look at that too. And I think people overestimate how good their data is all the time, because they can't see it. They see it in the front end, they see it in the CRM, they see it in the ERP, and it all looks right. But you can't see the 100,000 other records in the back end that we see, which is date of birth is only filled in 12% of the time, or address, or in this case they're duplicated records which should be eradicated. All these things you can automate out of the workflow, but again, you need to make sure it's valid. Like I say, don't think this doesn't exist, because I've seen it countless times. So what you need to realize is that it can also be really damaging if you don't get this right, because again, previous employer, which I hope you don't find out who it is, because I throw them under the bus all the time. But previous employer, great case study, was bonuses for developers were always tied to certain KPIs and metrics, which was financial money at the end of the month that's going to be paid into your bank account is tied to certain KPIs and metrics. Now, not all of it, but about 20 to 30% of it was nonsense, and it would just fluctuate, and it would be really a flip of a coin whether you were going to get paid or not, because bonus, not obviously salary. And you can probably imagine the damage that does to your development team when you've got, a carrot to say, right, you want to, this, if you do all of this, this is what you're going to get at the end of the month. And you work tirelessly and you've achieved all your internal metrics, and then you get your pay slip and they go, oh, no, you didn't hit your KPIs. Not because of the work you did or anything, or because somebody hates you, simply because the numbers just aren't right. It's duplicated, or certain things with certain tags weren't being kept up in the metrics. So all these kind of things can have quite significant knock-on effects. And again, if you're not having a look at it, there might be unintended consequences that you're suffering from. So data quality, making sure that it's valid and it's accurate, doing regular data quality audits is paramount. And that's what I need you to do. Go back and just check. Just say, look, oh, we're measuring this, we're measuring that. I often found arguments with a company between the sales director and the finance director because they couldn't agree on how to measure gross profit. There are constant arguments over what should be included and what shouldn't be included. And sometimes, it's difficult. And without having a concrete sit down and saying, well, this is how we're going to measure it, we've tested the data, if we do it in this way, it will always be accurate and will always be measured this way until we change it. So just go and do some audits and make sure that your data is accurate is my tip. Next, so that was pillar 3, data quality and analytics. Pillar 4 is data talent. Where do we start? Talent is hard to come by at the minute, data talent. So what I mean by talent is data scientists, data analysts, data engineers, data architects, data project managers. All of this, very expensive, very hard to come by. And I think with what we were talking about earlier, with curbs on foreign migrant workers coming over to work in the data industry, it's only going to get harder and harder unless you look at outsourcing it, which is quite difficult for some people to do. So a few stats relating to that. A recent report, which is about 12 to 18 months out of date now, so I think it's 2023, 2022, there are potentially 178 to 234,000 data roles specifically to be filled at Department of Science and Trade 2021. And it sort of shows you the shortage we seem to be having at the minute. That's also backed up by almost half of businesses have struggled to recruit for roles that require data skills. It's just not something that's really prevalent in the market. It's so important and it's so valuable, but it's lacking at the minute. And that's what I, again, need to realise. So I've got this one as well, which slightly different point. Data engineer, data analyst, people need to, what's the difference? There is no difference. Bit of a joke, but I see it all the time, which is when you recruit for a data role, because there's not many people at all, you try and recruit one person and make them do everything. And I hear this all the time. Oh, you're a data analyst, great. Well, you can do the database stuff as well, and you can do the data architecture mapping. Not really. They're different roles. They need to be supported. A key story I've got from this for a data analyst role is a company I work with quite regularly, is they said, Elliot, we've hired data analysts in the past and they never work out. They always tell us stuff we don't care about. We pay them lots and lots of money, and at the end of the month they tell us stuff and send us reports that we have no interest. And I always say to that, well, how are they supported? And like, what do you mean? And they're supported by project managers. That's not really the support I'm talking about. If you've got a data analyst whose job is just to find and work out and do those calculations, to do those metrics and KPIs that we've spoken about, they've got no control on how they get that data. They can't go into the database. They haven't got database skills, a lot of them. They haven't got the data strategy. If a company hasn't got a data strategy and say, go figure out this, go work out this, then they are just going to give you rubbish because they don't have anything to really work off. They're not a data project manager, they're just there for analysis. Data scientists as well. I think a lot of people are confusing data analysts with data scientists and machine learning engineers, thinking, oh, AI, machine learning, that's data, give it to a junior data analyst. Not going to have the skill set, and then anything they do produce is usually not worth implementing because it's not valid, it's not accurate, it's not effective at what it does. So my point here is what you need to realise is that there's many, many different roles. And if you want a good, solid data team, A, it's going to cost you, and B, there's a lot of roles to go at. So sometimes it's quite good to adopt services of different companies that can help you out with these different things. IT companies, for example, might be able to help you out with the engineering side. BI consultancies might be able to help you out with the analysis side, and so on and so forth. Another thing I want you guys to start looking at doing, which is because talent's expensive, because it's hard to come by, what you can start doing is creating citizen data analysts. So a citizen data analyst isn't actually a data analyst at all. It's a business user, someone that you've already got employed, but you're upskilling them with data analyst skill set. So what I see quite frequently, and it's in that DSIT report as well, which is the best way to overcome the shortage of talent is to upskill your existing talent. They have domain knowledge that no data analyst or scientist will ever have. I might be a pretty good data scientist, but I'm not going to know how to manufacture widgets as well as a widget manufacturer that's been in Hull for 50 years. They've got that knowledge and they might have worked there 20 years. Now to add a data science or a data analyst element to what they do in a day-to-day role, they're going to be a great data analyst and they're going to be available because you've already got them. So that's what we call a citizen data analyst, and I think that's a really, really good way of overcoming the shortage of talent. is to upskill your existing talent to become data analysts. They're not going to be machine learning engineers. They're not going to be, the best. But if your data strategy, which we talked about earlier, doesn't need that, then you maybe don't need to go out and find a team of data scientists and data analysts just because that's what everybody else is doing. You might find that if we upskill the odd project manager, that will do the job. So that's my takeaway for data talent. But what I also want to talk about is data culture, which is completely different to data talent. So this is pillar 5. And data culture is talking about how people actually feel about data. And I feel, because it's been done so poorly for so long, that a lot of businesses have a poor data culture. Like the ones I've worked at, they don't see any value in it, because every so often someone will get a great idea of going, hey, let's measure this. And it never really works out. The data's poor, it's poor quality, it's not available, it's not accessible. No one really knew what they were doing with it anyway. They were just kind of poking around to see if they could find anything. And that leads to a pretty negative data culture. And when you have that, it means that any strategy, infrastructure, talent you put in place is usually doomed to fail, because you've got people in your business kind of already expecting it to fail. A bit like my example from earlier with my first AI project. Everyone I went to for support, for data, for insight, already wanted me not to be successful with it. They didn't really want me to go off and be a shining light and be like, we need to be more data driven, because it meant more work for them. A lot of people at the minute also think they're going to be replaced by AI. Doesn't help when you're sat there looking over their shoulder trying to capture every single thing they do to replace it and automate it, without telling them that's not the strategy. The strategy is to learn what they do, automate what we can, so that they can go off and do more profitable tasks. So again, another meme, but this is what I mean, a dashboard. Do we trust this data? Very similar to the dashboard in the managing director's office. It didn't even look at it in the end. It was just it might as well have been a Banksy piece, because no one ever really looked at it. Because you don't trust any of the numbers on it, because of that poor data culture, because you don't even know where it's come from. Someone made it 2 years ago, it hasn't been updated, and you can see the numbers are wrong. You can see 6 different Steves. If you see 6 different Steves, how do I know that he's even sold that much? So that data culture of not being able to trust it is just, you need to sort of tackle that as best you can. And like I said before, it's self-perpetuating. So you having a bad data culture, when you create a new data project, you go, great, we'll do a new data project. Everyone already thinks it's going to fail and wants it to secretly fail. And then when it does, it kind of supports their overarching beliefs that data projects are rubbish, that they don't offer any value, that they'll never be as good as my gut feeling. I've worked here 20 years. Data can't tell me what I don't already know. I've seen that a lot. Again, previous customer, they were saying, you pick any one of those sales guys, I can tell you who the best customers are, who the worst customers are. And I was like, great. And I was asking loads of other questions like, well, how long have they been the best customer? Why are the worst customers the worst customers? Have you done anything to try and tackle why they're the worst customers? What are you measuring them being worst on? A lot of people go, well, they buy the least, right? But do they pay their bills on time? Are they easy to deliver to? Can you talk to them quite freely? Are they open to, being upsold to? All these other things, no idea, because you can only store so much knowledge in your head, even as the best salesman. So it's trying to break that cycle of data doesn't offer any value. Any project that my manager asks me to do is a waste of time. I don't want to do it. I don't want to get these numbers, because A, it might show me up. It might show that I'm not actually as good as I reported myself to be. So ultimately, I kind of want it to not work in the end anyway. So you need to try and break that cycle. And I think what you need to do is just draw a line in the sand. Just be honest. Park the ego and just be like, look, we're not here to, we're not here to discipline anyone. We're not here to criticize anyone. We're simply here to say, look, we've got bad data culture and it needs to be fixed. We need to start being more data driven. We need to start making decisions that are based on data. We can't have that if you've got this mindset of it offers no value. So my other tip is a top-down approach. Lead by example. If you're the director, if you own the business, if you founded it, lead by example. Be the most data-driven. Ask data-leading questions. Be insightful. I read a quote. I can't remember who it was. I apologise, but it was saying that curiosity is contagious. is that if you're curious and you want to know the answers to your key business questions and find, oh, I wonder why that is, or oh, is that always the case? What cases is it not? That's contagious, and people will start to then break their mindset from negative to maybe not entirely positive, but more neutral towards positive. It's not going to happen overnight, but it is something you need to be aware of, because you might have those other 4 pillars in place, but all this sort of historical negativity might come to bite you. Finally, pillar 6, I wanted to talk about data governance. And data governance has sort of 3 key pillars. So when I talk about data governance, I'm talking about, first and foremost, security, in terms of, is it safe? I think a lot of people are starting to wake up to cybersecurity threats, data being stored in the cloud, being moved from cloud to on-prem and on-prem to cloud for analysis, and sort of downloading reports, and between systems as well. If you've got 1,000 systems and it's all sharing data, where are the weaknesses within that infrastructure? I think people are starting to wake up to that, and it's something you need to be aware of and take seriously as a data governance point. Within data governance, we also include privacy. Are you GDPR compliant? Are there any sorts of ICO regulations and privacy laws that you need to be above board on? Normally people fall foul of this when it comes to marketing and B2C companies, in terms of, I've seen it, I've scraped data off social media websites, and then you go, well, maybe if we just target them with specific ads that we know they're more likely to buy because they commented on their friend's post about the same thing, you're going to get into a bit of trouble there. So you just need to make sure that anything you are doing is above board and compliant, and gets all the privacy issues out the way. You've got to get consent if you're going to use it for something like that, which is incredibly hard if you've got tens of thousands of customers online. And the final thing is democratization, which is, if I work in a business, the more access I have to data around the business, the better I can do my job. So I think the value isn't just having sales data and just having that, isn't just having marketing data, isn't just having finance data. The value is democratizing all of that. So as a salesperson, I can see if I've sold X because marketing have had a 10% uplift in engagement on posts regarding something I've just sold, and that's had a 3% lift on the bottom line in finance and operations, that's the impact it's had. I think every individual is now part of a bigger thing, and I think the sum of the parts is greater than the individual. So that's something is part of data governance, is making sure that people have access to that data as well, so that they can do their jobs but do them more effectively. What you need to realize is exactly what I've just told you. Data that flows throughout the organization needs to be safe and secure. It needs to be consensual. It needs to be above board on privacy, and it needs to be democratized so that everybody can have access to it. What you need to do, again, this might go back into your data strategy, but make sure that you've got a data governance framework in place. Make sure that everybody knows what you can and cannot do. We offer GDPR compliance trainings just every so often, just 6 months, just to make sure that no one's doing anything that they thought, oh, this is a great idea, I bet no one's thought of this. They have, and it's illegal. We see it a lot. So just you don't know. It changes so frequently. I think they change and push laws out, every year, and they make updates and amendments, and it's hard to keep up to date with. Just having those kind of refreshers and a centralized data governance framework really helps, and making sure that departments are sharing data, not just having it in Sage 50 and no one can look at that apart from the roles I've permitted there to be for their jobs, but allowing it to be shared. And I think the main issue with that is because people are worried about data security. They're thinking, well, what's your role? Or you're a salesman, or well, you only need this part of the sales CRM then to do your job. Okay, or you're a finance admin assistant, you only need this part of the finance Sage package to do your job. Well, actually, if you had a better data governance framework in place, you could share different pieces, not everything, you don't have to share every single piece of data with everyone. People are very nervous when you start talking about everyone having access to everything. But just to think, well, what could finance also have that would help sales, or would help marketing, or would help operations? Key examples of this was when I was a developer, and we were building solutions, and we'd spend months on this one project, and I think 3 months we were on this project, and we were building, and we were tearing our hair out. We were trying to get the best solution for this customer, and then I think I was just getting a coffee, or we were having a meeting, or I don't know what it was, but the finance director and the credit controller was there, and he was saying, "Oh," I was like, "How's your day?" He said, "Oh, I've just put ABC Limited on hold." I said, "Really?" I said, "Well, we've been working on that project for 3 months." He said, "Well, they haven't paid their bills in 6 months." But because we didn't have access to anybody's data, unless I actually go and have a coffee with the credit controller, which I'm not going to do as a developer downstairs, I would never know that they were on hold because the data doesn't flow. So therefore, we've been doing 3 months of work for potentially free. Yes, they might take them to court, and there might be some things, and we might get that money back eventually, but we should just move on to another project. You know, instead of tearing your hair out trying to organise meetings with this customer that isn't paying, we should just draw a line on the sand and said, right, well, we'll put that on hold because our credit controls put it on hold, instead of just working naively and not having a clue. Another great example, sales and marketing. You'd think they'd be like that. They never are. You know, like if you go to sales and be like, what's marketing pushing out for the next 3 months? No idea. If you go to marketing, you know, what's selling really well? No idea. So it's you could possibly see, by having a data governance framework that democratizes that data, where sales and marketing can share, and credit controllers and developers can see certain bits that would help them both do their jobs better. You can see the obvious value there. But that's obviously not always obvious to people when they go, oh, why has my developer got credit controller information? I don't need everything, but just one column that says on hold, not on hold. That's all I need to know. So then I can go ahead. So things like that, and again with the marketing stuff, what's selling well? This printer, oh, it's going gangbusters. People love it because of these reasons. Great, put it on the marketing campaign for the next week or two. So like I said earlier, and I'll repeat it again, there's one thing that I really want you to take away from today. It's you need to become data fluent, not as an individual. Well, yes, as an individual, but as an organisation. The organisation needs to go through a transformational period where it starts to become data fluent as best you can. And the ways to do that is exactly what I've just said, which is focus on the 6 main pillars, which is make sure first and foremost you have a solid data strategy which is aligned with your business strategy. I want to achieve X, Y, and Z. What data do we need? What infrastructure do we need? What people do we need to support us getting X, Y, and Z? So once you've got that, you can then go and find a blueprint of what data you currently have. A lot of people rush in to go buy data sets because like, oh, that would be really helpful for us, when you might already have it. You're just not harnessing it well enough. So you could save a fortune there. So looking at your infrastructure, then yes, if you need additional software to help you achieve your data strategy, then go to market. And that's when the AI bit, which I've told you to forget about up until now, comes in. AI should be a strategic decision that you've made based on your data strategy, not the herd saying AI, so let's go rush into AI. It should be, I've identified that I need to be able to classify customers between profitable and non-profitable, and I think AI would do a really good job of doing that, and we have the data set to support it, and we have the talent in place to support it, and the infrastructure in place to support it, so it'll be automated. Great, let's go to market and find artificial intelligence that can do that for us. Again, that's when the software piece comes in. Again, the data quality and the analysis, you know, if you want to measure 10% uplift in sales or a 3% improvement in quality of widgets, how am I going to measure that? How are we going to measure it accurately? And things like that. If you're going to start, you know, paying people based on these metrics, please make sure it's quality data. And then you want to look at talent. You know, have you got the skill set in-house, or have you, you know, employed the services of somebody externally to offer you that talent so that you can achieve your data strategy? And then again, culture. Don't let culture bite you, because it will. Because people don't like change. They don't want to think that you're going to be able to see every single detail about what they do day to day. People don't want to feel like you're being tracked and monitored all the time. But again, that comes back to data strategy and having a clear, structured, organisational view of this is what we're going to do, and this is why, and this is not what we're going to do. And then finally, that data governance piece, democratising that data, making sure it's safe. I've heard when I was doing a cybersecurity module at university, I'll never forget, Hull Police was saying that there was a law firm in Hull that had been going over a decade, and they had all the cybersecurity measures in place. They were doing well, they were a successful business, and then they got hacked because a fax machine was still printed into the data, onto the network. They got through the fax machine, locked them all out, lost all their data, spent a fortune trying to get it back from the hackers, who ultimately gave it them back, and then all the data was not right. They didn't give it all back. It was in a different format to what it was originally. It was an absolute mess, and they lost a fortune because of it. So again, when you've got all those other 5 pillars in place, don't be bitten by the last bit, which is making sure that your data is secure online. Really simple to remember. So a little bit about before we wrap up, my utopia, and what I see the vision in the future is going to be, which my utopia is every business is a data fluent business. No matter the size, no matter the industry, no matter what you're trying to achieve, every business has got a solid data strategy in place. Your talent's upskilled, you've got a great culture where everyone's asking really insightful questions, you have an infrastructure to support that, and you have a microcosm of data-driven people all working towards the same dream. That to me is then job done. That's the utopia. So I want to talk very briefly before we finish about DataStream's commitment on how we deliver that. So we basically help support you becoming data fluent. So our commitment is this, which is we first and foremost follow exactly what we've just gone through, which is we start with data strategy. You probably don't have one. You might not even have a corporate strategy depending on your size of your business. You might think, we've got a few things we want to achieve, but we haven't really got it written down. We'll write it down, we'll say, right, well, what is it we want to achieve? And then we'll go from there and we'll cement that. We'll then look at the infrastructure. We'll then provide a blueprint of everything you've got, how data flows, decisions being made, what CRMs, ERPs, different systems are saying, what data is within those systems as well. And then that really helps, because if you're saying, I want to measure X, well, if you haven't got the data to measure X, well, then we can flag that up here and say, we need to address how we're going to fill that gap. Is there a proxy we can use, something like that? Or we can engineer features. We can say, we don't have that, but if we use this, this, and this, we could create a new thing, which we could label whatever, customer success ratio, or whatever you want to say. Data quality, this is where we really thrive, which is, as data scientists and analysts, we're very good at looking through vast quantities of data and saying what you have got, and most importantly, what you haven't got. You thought that was full, you thought that was complete, you thought everyone was putting that data in correctly, they probably weren't. How can we look at creating data validation rules? How can we build data streams that take out duplicated data or data that we shouldn't include in our analysis and things like that, whilst also still keeping it? Because an anomaly is still useful, even if it's an anomaly, which is, well, why is that coming up? Is that coming out every so often? Is it only coming up under certain circumstances? And we can dig into that. So we really look at how valid, accurate, and available, and how good a quality that data is too. Then we look at your data talent. So either DataStream can offer that as a support, so we can say, you don't have any data analysts, data scientists, data engineers, but to get that infrastructure in place, to get that analysis in place, we can do that for you. And we can also upskill your talent, so we can create those citizen data analysts that we were talking about before. We can help work on that data culture. A lot of the time it's helpful to have a third party come in, because it's hard, because people have got egos, and there's a lot of history that's gone on that we're not privy to. So sometimes having a third party come in and try and work through that data culture as best we can helps. And finally, that data governance piece, doing those GDPR compliance trainings, doing that cybersecurity audit, getting you to be Cyber Essentials Plus and the rest, and democratizing that data and allowing people to view data from other departments without it breaching internal data politics, or you can't just go start looking at certain accounts and things like that if that's not your business. But we can put that into account as well, so we can take those requirements too. Again, that might be part of your data strategy, which is we want to democratize data so people have got what they need to be effective, but we don't want it so that one person could run off with the entire company's data. So we can put that into account as well. We can do roles and permissions. So essentially that's our commitment, is we take care of everything of that. We're kind of like an outsourced data department which takes care of those 6 things, and over a 12, 18, 24 months we'll take you through that slowly but surely, so that at the end of it you're slowly becoming a data fluent organisation. And if you're interested in learning more, that's our website. You can book a meeting with me, and we can talk about how we can start making your business more data fluent in the future and creating a data strategy. Thank you.